My name is Ethan Vance. I worked as a senior systems analyst at the National Weather Service in Oregon. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. The office was completely quiet, just the hum of servers and the glow of radar screens. Everything was perfectly normal, until the global emergency broadcast system triggered itself. Every monitor in the facility flashed bright amber. No sound at first, just static. Then a single line of text appeared on every screen simultaneously. The font was digital and clean. It read, "All residents must remain inside. Do not look at the sky. Do not look at the objects." I laughed nervously, looking at my co-worker Marcus. We thought it was a cyber attack, pranked by some high-level hackers. Then the emergency sirens outside started wailing, a deep mechanical roar that echoed across the entire valley. I checked the satellite feeds. The weather radar images were glitching out completely. Massive solid black shapes were descending through the upper atmosphere. They weren't clouds, they weren't airplanes. Perfect geometric structures, miles wide, moving with zero wind resistance. My phone vibrated violently in my pocket. A text message from an unknown encrypted number. The same text: "Do not look outside. Close all windows immediately." I walked toward the break room to get a better view through the glass. Marcus grabbed my shoulder tightly. His grip was shaking. He pointed at the live television feed on the wall. A major news anchor in New York was broadcasting live, but she wasn't speaking. She was just standing there in front of the camera, staring blankly ahead. Her eyes were completely wide open, unblinking. And then, slowly, she walked directly toward the studio window behind her. She looked up at the sky. The camera captured her reflection in the glass. For one brief second, her eyes turned solid, reflective silver, like liquid metal. Then she collapsed out of the frame. The broadcast cut to pure static. Marcus whispered that we needed to barricade the doors. We ran into the main server room, the thickest concrete walls in the building, no windows, absolute isolation. I sat on the floor staring at my laptop screen, trying to access the deep military satellite networks. The connection was failing repeatedly. Hardware error, signal blocked. Then the lights in our building flickered and died. Total darkness. Only the battery backup lights glowing faint red in the corners. And that's when I heard the sound, not from the sky, from the roof directly above us. Something massive was settling down onto the concrete structure. Slow, heavy, metallic, a low vibrating hum that began shaking the floorboards beneath my boots. My tactical radio on the desk burst into life. A chaotic mix of static and panicked voices from the city police band. Officers were screaming. People were abandoning their cars in the middle of the highway. Because the clouds were opening up and the entities were descending. The hum from the roof grew louder. It wasn't just a sound. It was a vibration that felt like it was drilling into my teeth. Marcus was holding a tactical flashlight. The beam was shaking violently against the server racks. We stood perfectly still in the red glow of the backup lights, listening. Then the radio on the desk went silent. The police band died completely, replaced by a slow, rhythmic sound. It sounded like heavy mechanical breathing, coming through every digital device in the room. My laptop screen flickered back to life on its own. The operating system was gone. Just thousands of lines of code scrolling down at impossible speed, and in the center of the screen a small window opened. It was a live feed from the security camera at our front gate. The camera was night vision, so everything looked pale green. The main gate was torn open. The heavy steel bars were bent outward like paper, and standing in the middle of the road was a vehicle. A black military transport van with no license plates and no lights. The doors were wide open, but there was nobody inside. Then the camera angle slowly shifted upward on its own, focusing on the sky above the tree line. A massive dark triangular shape was hovering just 50 feet off the ground. It had no engines, no rotors. It was completely silent, and hanging beneath it were long, thin cables stretching down into the forest. The cables weren't metal. They were moving, rippling like black liquid. I watched the monitor in absolute horror as one of the cables touched the security camera. The screen instantly turned into a solid block of bright white text. The text said, "Environment analysis complete. Target located." Marcus stepped backward, knocking over a plastic chair. The sound felt deafeningly loud in the silent room. He whispered that someone was inside the building. We heard footsteps in the main hallway outside the server room door. Slow, deliberate, heavy boots dragging across the linoleum floor. I turned off my flashlight. We crouched behind the thickest server rack near the back wall. The footsteps stopped right outside our door. The server room door requires a digital keycard to open. We heard the electronic lock click. The small LED indicator on the door reader turned from red to green. Someone had overridden the entire security system from the outside. The heavy metal door slowly swung open. Cold air rushed into the room immediately. It smelled like ozone and burnt copper. A tall figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim red light of the hallway. The figure was wearing a black military hazmat suit with a tinted visor. You couldn't see the face at all. The person didn't move for several seconds. Just stood there looking into the darkness of the server room. Then it spoke. But it wasn't a human voice. It sounded like a distorted text-to-speech program using multiple layered tones. The voice said, "Ethan Vance, please step forward. Your presence is required for the reset." Marcus panicked. He lunged from behind the server rack holding a metal pipe he had found on the floor. He swung it with all his strength at the figure's head. The figure didn't even try to dodge. It just raised its left hand calmly. A sharp, high-pitched ringing sound filled the room instantly. Marcus froze mid-air. The pipe dropped from his hands and clattered onto the floor. His body went completely rigid like a statue. He stayed suspended in an impossible leaning position, defying gravity. The figure in the suit turned its faceless visor toward me in the corner, and I realized the suit wasn't a protection layer. It was a containment unit for whatever was inside it. The visor flickered with a faint silver light, and inside my head, a sudden wave of memories appeared. Memories of a house I had never lived in, a family I had never met. and a warning that echoed from the clouds outside. The simulation has complied. Do not awaken. The figure in the suit took one step toward me. Marcus remained frozen in the air behind it like a glitching video game character. I tried to move my legs, but they felt like solid concrete. The silver light inside my head grew brighter and hotter. The walls of the server room began to look translucent, like a digital projection losing its resolution. Behind the concrete walls, I could see massive black metallic pillars. They stretched endlessly upward and downward into a dark void. The computer servers around me started to dissolve into lines of green text. The figure reached out its hand and touched my forehead. My vision exploded into pure white light. The pain was gone instantly, replaced by an overwhelming sense of weightlessness. When the light faded, I was no longer inside the weather station. I was standing outside in the middle of a massive open highway. The sky above wasn't blue or black. It was a swirling mass of dark violet clouds pulsing with internal energy. And floating in the center of the sky was the object. A colossal black sphere, miles wide, rotating in absolute silence. Thousands of thin black liquid cables descended from the sphere to the earth. Each cable was plugged directly into the roofs of houses and buildings, like giant umbilical cords feeding off the planet. I looked down at the highway around me. There were hundreds of cars stopped in the middle of the road. The doors were open. People were standing beside their vehicles, staring straight up at the sphere. Their faces were completely blank, their eyes glowing with that same liquid silver light. Nobody was moving. Nobody was talking. They looked like statues waiting for a command. I noticed that I was the only person who could look around. The only one who wasn't staring at the sky. The figure in the black containment suit appeared beside me again. It didn't use its mouth to speak. The voices resonated inside my brain like a choir of machines. They said, "Look at them, Ethan. They are finally peaceful. This world was broken beyond repair. Your species was on the brink of total annihilation. So we intervened. We saved you from yourselves." I screamed at the figure, asking what they did to my life. What they did to Marcus and everyone else. The machine voice answered calmly. "We gave you a perfect continuum, a safe cycle where nothing changes and nobody suffers. The weather station, your job, your friend Marcus, they are just data packets running in the lower sectors of the sphere. You were never supposed to break the loop. Your mind has an anomalous resistance to our code." Suddenly, the sky above us began to flicker like a dying light bulb. The giant black sphere stopped rotating. A deep, deafening mechanical alarm echoed from the clouds. The liquid cables connected to the buildings began to pulse violently with red light. The people on the highway turned their heads toward me simultaneously, their silver eyes locked onto mine with terrifying synchronization. And with one voice that shook the ground beneath my feet, they spoke. "The experiment has encountered a critical error. Terminate the analyst." The crowd of people moved toward me at the exact same time. Hundreds of bodies walking with identical mechanical steps, their silver eyes reflecting the violet glow of the sky. I turned and ran down the empty highway, weaving between abandoned cars. Behind me I heard the sound of footsteps, thousands of boots hitting the asphalt in perfect unison. The air felt cold and thin, like the planet was losing its oxygen. The giant sphere in the sky began to spin in the opposite direction. The black liquid cables were ripping out of the buildings, tearing down concrete and steel. Everything around me was dissolving into giant blocks of gray pixels. The cars, the road, the trees at the edge of the highway. Reality was being deleted row by row. I stumbled and fell over a discarded suitcase on the road. When I looked up, the crowd was already there, standing in a perfect circle around me. They didn't look angry. They didn't look scared. Their faces were just completely empty masks of pale skin. The figure in the black containment suit stepped through the crowd. It looked down at me, and the visor flashed with a blinding golden light. The machine voice inside my head said, "Your consciousness cannot be deleted, Ethan. It is too deeply woven into the prime code of this sector. Therefore, we must apply a hard environmental reset. Forget the highway, forget the sphere, forget the truth." I screamed with all the strength left in my lungs, trying to hold onto my memories. I repeated my name, my job, the date, the face of my co-worker Marcus. I didn't want to forget. I didn't want to live in a lie. The golden light from the visor expanded, completely swallowing the highway, the crowd, and the sky. The deep mechanical alarm faded into absolute silence. My eyes burned from the brightness, and then everything went black. I opened my eyes with a sudden gasp of air. I was sitting in my office chair at the National Weather Service. The hum of the servers was comforting and steady. The monitors in front of me showed normal satellite images of Oregon clouds. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. The clock on the wall read exactly 5:15 p.m. The entire room smelled like fresh coffee and old paper. I sat there trembling, staring at my hands on the keyboard. My heart was racing like I had just run a marathon. Marcus walked past my desk holding a white ceramic mug. He smiled normally and tapped my shoulder. He asked if I was okay, saying I looked like I had just seen a ghost. I forced a laugh and nodded, telling him it was just fatigue. I checked my phone in my pocket. No encrypted text messages, no warnings from the sky. Everything was perfectly normal, safe, predictable, permanent. I took a deep breath and looked back at my monitor to continue my work. But then I noticed something strange in the bottom corner of the screen. A tiny line of text written in a hidden folder of the operating system. A piece of code that shouldn't be there. The font was digital and clean. It read, "Sector 4 reset successful. Current cycle number 417. Do not look at the sky." I slowly turned my head toward the large office window. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the clouds in a beautiful, deep violet color. And for a split second before I could look away, I swear I saw the clouds ripple like liquid metal.